If you're going to become skilled at higher self-presence, then it's important that you can become the master of your mind. And so your mind is no longer incessant in its internal noise and pointless worry and thought and so on, so that the higher self can flourish and come to the surface. And then all these qualities of the higher self can become part of who you are. And so you become substantially greater than you were. So much more creative, so much more emphatic, so much more able to understand your environment, to navigate all of life issues, to relate, to discern truth, and so on and on and on and on. But in the way that the modern world has been constructed, it is becoming less and less and less possible to achieve that outcome, because you have been blessed and cursed with. Hi, it's Muzz iEvolv. Thank you very much for being here again this week. My apologies for being very absent recently, but it's all over. The saga has finally come to a close, and this is it. This is the palace. This is the house I'm finally living in. I've signed a contract, so I'm going to be here for a while. I'm not going to bore you with more. We've all heard enough of this saga, especially me. So, have you read this book yet? If you haven't, then I recommend that you do. It really can change the way that you think about life, about yourself, about your purpose, about your relationship with your creator, and so on. Great stuff. I still because this is channeled work, even I will pick it up as a random page and I'll read from time to time, because it is really good stuff. This book is now very close to being released. I know I keep saying this, but everything that I've been working on for the last, 6 months plus, has now coming to fruition. So this month in October, I'm hoping to release this book, a course related to this book, a brain entrainment audio series, and also I'm going to re-release the How to Channel course. I've been working on all of this, putting it all together, and it's very close to being finished. So I'm going to release all of that this month. So I'll keep you posted. That's coming down the pipeline very soon. Exciting stuff for me. You've been waiting long enough for me to do another channel, so I'm not going to go on and on about the other stuff. Let's just go directly into the channel topic for today. And the question is, are you bored? Good. Greetings and thank you for the question. Are you bored? Good. Now, that is a somewhat confusing question, because we say good without inferring what the answer to that question is. So, is it I'm not bored, good? Or is it I am bored, good? Well, in this discussion, we're going to demonstrate that boredom is actually a blessing. And it is something which is very much absent, conspicuously, from the earth human experience at this time. And at great detriment is its absence felt. Because it is important that you as a species have these windows which have been maligned or mislabeled as boredom. But really, it isn't boredom. Instead, it is a sacred moment. It is an opportunity for exploring realms of self which are not accessible when one is entertained or occupied. So, for this to make sense, we have to backtrack and establish some fundamentals, some parameters of what we are referring, the definitions. Some of it you may have heard before if you are a regular viewer of our discussions, but nonetheless, it does not harm to be reminded of how it all works so that you can understand this discussion, but also so that you can apply these principles to other areas of your life because they are fundamental and valuable. So, let us begin in this way. You are not what you see in the mirror, the avatar, the flesh suit, the meat puppet. This identity you know yourself as. When people call you by your name, that isn't actually you, but instead it's just a temporary mask or a temporary identity that you have during this current lifetime so that the true you, which is the higher self aspect, can continue its divine purpose of accumulating experience of itself, to know itself to completion through the vehicle of experience. That is your purpose because it is the one's purpose and you are an individuation of the one. You are the one experiencing itself through the proxy, which is you. So, if you are not the flesh suit, then this also includes that you are not the mind, because the mind is an abstraction or it is an artifact of the brain. It is a computation device. It allows for abstract thought so that you can be the infinite energetic that is having a physical experience. There needs to be some form of interface so that you can have a physical experience even though you're an entirely energetic being. And this is made possible through the physicality and also through the mind or the brain, which is an organic artificial intelligence. And so the mind isn't you, although the mind does have the capacity for self-identity, for creating the belief within oneself that it is you, that it is the identity. But this is a false belief. And it only occurs when you are not aware of the higher self. You're not aware that that is truly you. And so what occurs is your identity is placed in the mind. And then the hierarchy of identity now has the mind at the top. And the higher self, your true identity, doesn't even rank in the hierarchy because, for many, they are completely unaware that the higher self is even a part of them, even though the truth is, it is them. You literally are the higher self. It is not that the higher self is some higher realm where there is this alternate being that is somehow connected to you. You literally are the higher self. That higher realm being is you. And yet, when you are in this incarnation, you are in a state of amnesia. So, very similar to the way that the one is the single being. And yet, each of us, including you, including us, we are individuations of this single being. We are a fragmentation, you could say, of that single being. Yet we are that single being. In a very similar way, this identity you're living is an individuation of this larger higher self being which you are. And this avatar that you are, this identity, is in a state somewhat of amnesia. And as you go through your awakening, then you come to the point where you fully realize that you are the higher self being. And then you are the higher self made flesh. You are the higher self having a physical experience consciously. And in a very similar way, because it is a fractal universe, eventually, in the process of returning to the ultimate epiphany, which is, I am the one, and I always have been the one. On that march back, there will become an epiphanic moment where you will realize you are the one. And you will then become the one having a very conscious experience of itself. And when this is complete, where you fully have grasped and understand and integrated into this identity that you are the one, that is when you will coalesce back into the one. And your purpose for existing will have been completed. But this is a tangent which we have gone down many times before. So we're going to pull it back into this discussion that we're at and continue along this idea. So, if you are not the mind, then where are you? How do you fit? Where is your presence in this paradigm, which is you having the physical life at this moment? Your high self presence, or the presence of the true you, can be felt when the mind is silent. Because if the mind is not you and it is filling the mindscape, it is filling the headspace, it is filling the presence or the concept of self, then as long as that dominates, then it's not possible to be aware of the true being that you are. Because the true being that you are isn't the mind. And so it is only when the mind is silent that you are present more fully as this high self being which you truly are. So, in a sense, this is the same as saying that you exist between your thoughts. When you are mind silent and you allow the mind to quieten until finally the mind is completely still. It is not making a single internal sound. There is no internal imagery. Yet in this void, you are still aware that you are there. You still can appreciate that you are present. That presence which you appreciate, have an awareness of, that is the higher self. That is what is always there, beneath the noise of the mind. So the mind, in a sense, is shrouding your true identity, who you truly are. And as you become more skilled at silencing the mind, then you become more present as the higher self. And you become more demonstrative of the many abilities and skills and talents and capacities which are inherent to the higher self, which take you to a realm which is beyond physicality, where you can now do things and perceive things and create things and so on, which are at a genius level, beyond the limits of the finite intellect. Because the higher self is an infinite being, whereas the mind is a product of the brain, and so it is finite in its capacities. It is intended only to be a computation device, facilitating the higher self's integration into the physical reality. And so it should be treated as a tool rather than as the identity. And so the hierarchy of identity should be the higher self at the top. And the higher self is the master. And the mind is the humble servant. And so the mind becomes activated when it is called upon by the higher self master. It completes the duties it is delegated, and then when those duties have been completed, it returns to silence, awaiting the master's call again. Yet, how it is commonly lived in the human experience at this time is that the mind has assumed identity, and the mind has a mind of its own, it could be said. And so there is this incessant internal dialogue, even when you don't want it. Would you just shut up? Stop saying these things. Stop going over and over with that song, with those words, with that thing that person said to me, with these worries, with these anxieties about future bills and so on, would you please just shut up? This is when the mind has assumed so much autonomy that you feel you no longer have control of it. And there is now this separation forming in your internal identity, because you are saying to the mind, can you please just shut up? Yet the mind keeps going on. So if there is this separation, if you're speaking to the mind and saying, shut up please mind, then what identity are you assuming at that point? Is it a fragmentation of the mind? Are you going insane? No, what it actually is that you are leaning back into the higher self. So even when the mind is incessant, it will still steer you towards the higher truth, which is that you are not the mind. You are the higher self. So, if you're going to become skilled at higher self presence, then it's important that you can become the master of your mind. And so your mind is no longer incessant in its internal noise and pointless worry and thought and so on, so that the higher self can flourish and come to the surface. And then all these qualities of the higher self can become part of who you are. And so you become substantially greater than you were. So much more creative, so much more emphatic, so much more able to understand your environment, to navigate all of life issues, to relate, to discern truth, and so on and on and on and on. But in the way that the modern world has been constructed, it is becoming less and less and less possible to achieve that outcome, because you have been blessed and cursed with the mobile cellular device. And so now entertainment of many kinds is always at your fingertips. And so the opportunity for boredom has pretty much been entirely eliminated from your experience. And instead, whenever there is a spare moment, even going to the bathroom would be considered a boring event if the phone was not in your hand and you were listening to songs or reading the latest headlines or seeing the latest gossip or watching funny videos. And this has completely inundated all aspects of your life until now there is almost zero opportunity for boredom. But it's important that this idea of boredom is reframed, because boredom is a derogatory term that is used to explain the way that you use your time. However, it is not so much boredom, but rather it is opportunity to be present as the higher self, to step into the part of you which is most masterful. Because mastery is a higher self attribute. Genius is a higher self quality. Whereas the lower level of the physicality and it could be said, the intangible physicality, which is the abstraction of this organic artificial intelligence, which is the mindscape. It could be said it's like the desktop of the computer. Then, if you're going to be spending more time in the genius realm, then rather than perceiving these windows of time where you are not entertained, as something which is wasteful, see them instead as something which is a blessing, which is of great value. And so now you can spend time in silence, in deep immersion into the stillness of self. So if it is not filled with the entertainment of the cellular device, and it is not filled with the tribulations and the minutiae of the worrisome mind, then you will descend into a pool of stillness within self. And from here will percolate, will bubble, and make their way to the surface new ideas, new self-conceptions, new perspectives of the life that you are living, of the problems that you're facing. And you will find that you are now in possession of a totally new level of capacity, because it has arisen from a depth which previously you were very rarely tapping into. So, foster boredom. And when we say this, we of course assume that you're going to reframe the definition that you give these windows of time. So it could be called me time, it could be called meditation, it could be called creative time. But it is time that is away from the usual surface level distractions of your world, which is the TV, which is phone, which is useless entertainment, trashy magazines, gossip columns, and so on. Mainstream news also. And instead use that time to tap into the extra dimensions of self, where you start expanding into your extra dimensionality. And in this mind silence, where you allow yourself to expand, which happens just very naturally, the moment you allow your mind to go silent, you will immediately start expanding in your awareness of your extra dimensionality. And more of your infinity will be then included in your consciousness bubble. And then when you come out of that, you will have slightly grown in who you are. And now, on a permanent basis, some of your infinity, which was outside of your conscious awareness, is now inside your conscious awareness. And if you do this practice, or practices like this, on a regular basis, then incrementally you are growing and growing and growing and growing. But really what is occurring is that you are becoming more aware of your eternal infinity, of the being that you have always been. Now more of that being is included within your consciousness bubble. And all of the talents and attributes and characteristics and skills and genius and creativity and so on, which is built into this new expanded realm, now become part of the tool set you have when you're in the living, waking, conscious state. So, the easiest way to do this is, of course, to meditate. To sit in silence on some schedule of frequency and allow yourself to sink down into a place of stillness so the mindscape is completely empty, and then just spend some time there. Enjoy how it feels. Acknowledge that you are present as the higher self, and realize through a recognition that it's not something that just appeared, but it's always there. It's always there. When you are in that state, you don't feel like, oh, what's this? Who am I now? What is this new identity I'm experiencing? You realize it feels completely familiar because, of course, you have been this being eternally. So it will feel very familiar. All that has occurred is all of the noise and all of these layers of sediment and muck and garbage which have been piled on top. Thank you to the mind, is now just being swept away. And the true you that has been underneath can now breathe into the space to feel the space with your presence of who you actually are. So, this can be achieved in other ways, such as spending time with your pet, walking with your pet, patting your pet, or walking through nature, just very much in the moment, no thought other than a sense of awe for the beauty and the wonder and the splendor of nature. Or it could be in a state of creativity, creating your art, producing your music, writing something which is drawn from the heart. There are many ways this can be achieved. But the fundamental idea, the base level of what you are trying to achieve here is that you are allowing the higher self to be present and the mind to be relegated to servant and then delegated the activities you wish for it to perform when it is necessary and only then. And the rest of the time, it waits alert, yet obediently silent. On the edge of its seat, waiting for the master to call upon it again, because it is so eager and willing to serve. And in a state of appreciation that it has been utilized in this way, as the divine design intended. And so it is not off the rails, out of control with its thought, which was never the intention. And it is not where the mind wants to be. So, this understanding and practice is particularly important because it is understood by the Cabal of Darkness and all their minions and all of the different methodologies they utilize to maintain control. That as long as you are preoccupied in the identity of the mind, then you are going to be much easier to march off the cliff, much easier to deceive, much easier to fool, much easier to get you to act in a way which is counter to what is most beneficial for you, for your family, for your community, your nation, and for your entire species. So, it is very purposefully that you have been inundated with so many options to entertain or occupy the mind such that the mind is always active. It is always on. And the higher self and all that it contributes is completely capped and lay dormant, suffocating beneath the burden of the never-ending mind noise. This preoccupation where your presence and your self is felt very much in this realm of mind. And it just stays there in this identity which isn't truly you. So, it is the technocratic version of give them bread and circuses. During the fall of the Roman Empire, when things were really starting to get bad, crime was on the rise, morality was on the decline, the financial system was on the edge of collapse, and so on and so on. To keep the masses distracted, it was policy to have bread and circuses, to have competitions which the community could attend for free, receive free bread, and be entertained to the point where they were distracted and all that was going on around them. As their nation and their way of life collapsed, they were not aware. They were unable to prepare. They were caught off guard. And as such, those that were orchestrating and responsible for this collapse were able to get away with what they did. And in a very similar way, the technocratic version is bread and circuses now coming through the screen of your cellular device, through the screen of your computer, through the screen of your TV. And so you are entirely distracted to what is going on across the human field as the cabal of darkness prepare themselves for the death blow, for the final moments of what they have been working towards for millennia. They are now literally in the final generation. This torch that has been passed from generation to generation through the bloodlines of the central families of the cabal of darkness, always marching forward to an agenda which they're very close to culminating. And yet the culmination now is under threat because humanity is awakening. So it's more important than ever right now that the cabal and their system of control keep you distracted, because there is so much going on at the same time. There is tyranny in virtually every facet of the human experience at this moment, because there is a sprint to the finish line to outpace humanity's awakening. So be aware that now more than any other moment in the human experience, you are being purposefully distracted in multiple ways, in every single way that they can conceive of. It is being utilized to distract you from what they are doing. So, next time you stop at the traffic lights, resist the urge to reach for your phone. The next time that you go to the bathroom, don't take your cellular device with you. The next time you're wondering, what can I do right now? Rather than reach for your phone, spend a moment in a comfortable chair with nothing but silence, and allow your mind to be completely turned off so that you can appreciate the beauty and the genius and the splendor of the higher self aspect, which is who you truly are. And make this a habit. Designate some time every day where you do an activity, or you leave the house, you go for a walk, and very specifically, you do not take your phone. Or if your phone is with you, it is in a mode that disconnects it from the system outside of the cellular device itself. These are important habits to have. These are opportunities which, when you allow them to be part of your regular schedule, will accelerate your growth, will increase your immunity to the lies and the deception of the system, will allow you to be of greater service in the lives of all those that know you, and will make possible, will be catalytic in increasing your vibration, so that now you are contributing to the entire human experience, literally by virtue of your vibration. And so you are becoming more and more and more of the unified being. Because the unified being the humanity being which you are all destined to become, will not exist in the mind of the individual, but will instead exist in the heart of the entire being. And that heart will be the combination of all of your hearts together. And the mind element will not be part of the glue, will not be part of the attraction, of the magnetism that draws you all together. In fact, to the contrary, it will be in spite of the mind that this connection into unity can be made. Because it is the mind which entertains the darkness. It is the mind which is capable of misconception about who and what you are. It is the mind that will entertain the ideas that there are other elements within the human field which are worthy of your hate, which are worthy of your feelings and actions which diminish them, even though they are just an aspect of the same being which you are. So, for humanity to come together and to form this single heart of the many hearts, then it is essential that each of you individually become the master of the mind. And the mind is delegated to faithful servant as the computation device that exists only to fulfill the wishes and desires of the high self-master. And it is when you begin demonstrating this that it is activating, it becomes catalytic in also reshaping those around you to start modeling in a similar way. And partially it will become because they observe how you live, but also it will be a harmonic effect because that is the intention of the divine design. When the apparatus, including the mind, is utilized in the way it was intended, then this very naturally becomes the presentation. That this hierarchy exists now with the high self at the highest position. And when you are this way, you will emit an energetic quality, a frequency, a vibration, which will very naturally start activating a shift in those around you. And their resonance with your frequency will very naturally start reshaping their internal hierarchy of identity. So, are you bored? Good. You should be. Foster more of that. And you will grow. You will achieve a new sense of self that fills you with awe and wonder at what is possible, and also of what greater heights you can reach. And at the same time, you will be contributing in a catalytic way to the awakening of your entire species, so that the golden age can be reached, where all of you have magnetized together to form the single heart and begin living the new era of greater expansion, of greater love and greater wisdom. Thank you, and we love you. Thank you very much for being here this week. I think that went okay, considering I've been away. I was feeling really rusty before I did that session, but I'm pretty happy with how it went. I haven't watched it back yet, but I think it was okay. I'm going to tell you a story this week about my dad. I didn't grow up with my dad. My parents split up when I was 3, so I only ever saw my dad during school holidays, and because he lived like 400 kilometers away, which I don't know what's that, like 250 miles or something. So I didn't see him very much. And I didn't really have that close a relationship because I was kind of very, very shy. And anyway, that's just the way it was. But I did love my dad, and he definitely loved me. And I remember a really nice memory I have of my dad is my dad was a farmer. And so every time we went and visited my dad, we would be on the farm. We're just working on the farm. And he was wearing a hat. We're having a lunch break. We're just sitting on the ground next to a fire, eating some food, just out of the cooler, out of the esky. And my dad was wearing a cap, and the cap had like little vent holes, just like you see the typical cap had little vent holes on the side. And I don't know what it was. I was young because I believed something. When I tell you this situation, I was believing something was going on, which I realize now it totally wasn't. But so maybe I was 10 or something, maybe. Anyway, my dad's talking to my brother, and he's sitting down, he's looking this way. And I'm standing next to him, and I was getting pieces of grass, and I was putting them in the hole, like that. When he wasn't watching, I'd get a bit of grass, and very carefully I'd stick it in the hole. And then I put in one there, and I put in one there, and then I was putting in more, and then eventually he had all this grass sticking out of his hat, and I thought it was hilarious, and I was laughing, and he'd go, "Well, what's so funny? What are you laughing about, son?" "Oh, it's a bit strange. I don't know why you're laughing." And then he'd keep talking, and then I'd put in more until eventually he had so much grass sticking out of his hat. And I was laughing so much because I thought he had no idea. I thought he had no idea that he had all this grass sticking out of his hat, because I'd put so much in there. And every time that I'd laugh, I couldn't contain myself, I'd start laughing. He'd go, what's going on there, son? Why are you laughing?" "Silly boy." But I realise now that I'm a father, I realise now it was just my dad was playing along with the gag. He was letting me believe that he didn't know. Because I was like putting this grass in, it's like scraping along his scalp. Of course he knew, and I put in so many pieces. He had so much grass sticking out of his head. Of course he knew. But you're just being a great father. Just letting me believe that he didn't know, so I enjoyed the joke, which I did, and it's now a golden memory of mine. It's a really nice memory. So, thank you, Dad. Thank you, Dad. Thank you. All right, that's all for this week, and I look forward to seeing you again next week. Bye-bye.